Okay, and we're off and running here.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lyle. I'm with NVIT, and I've been working with Mr. Anderson on the School District 58 Transitions Project, which helps grade 12 students and students in general at the high school prepare for and plan for transition to post-secondary education. As a part of this project, we've arranged a series of guest speakers, and tonight's guest speaker is one of my colleagues from NVIT, Mr. Tom Whillms, who is a registered professional biologist and also the head of the ENRT, or Environmental Resource Technology Program at NVIT. So I am going to let Tom introduce himself, tell us a little bit more about your educational background and what you do.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I was happy to get the invite, and it's fun to do these sorts of things. I know that NVIT, well, in the past, we used to have kind of grade school students come to NVIT and sort of experience what things are like, and so it's cool to see some younger faces. So really appreciate the invite, David and Jennifer. Yeah, so my name's Tom Whillms, and I'm a registered professional biologist. I'm also a professional agrologist, so I can talk about kind of what those two things mean in a little bit. But basically, I do applied biology type of work in fisheries and in wildlife type of fields. So my educational background, very proud to say that I grew up in the Nicola Valley in Merritt, and so I attended the Bench Elementary School. That's where I went to school until 7th grade. And then I went over to Merritt Secondary School, and there was no middle school at that time. I don't think there is no middle school right now, right? So,
No.
Yeah, okay. So just high school. Yeah, so I went over to MSS, and kind of like, I can't remember exactly how it unfolded, but sometime around my first days in grade 8, there was a fire at MSS, and half the place burnt to the ground. So they had to rebuild it. So all that kind of like new stuff, that new parts of the building, that was brand new to me in the 8th grade, 8th and 9th grade, I think. So anyway, that's where I did my grade school education. I took a year off. I probably shouldn't say this. I'm probably trying to recruit students to go to university right away, but I took a year off after high school, which was really good. And I did a little bit of traveling in the South Pacific, and that was really fun to see some different places. I went down to New Zealand, and I got to meet some folks, some cool Maori folks, and went to Australia and to Fiji, and I met up with a few friends that I went to high school with over there too. And but anyway, my first college kind of post-secondary experience was I went to school out in southern Alberta at Lethbridge College. It was called Lethbridge Community College at the time. And what I wanted to do for my career, what I thought at the time, was I wanted to be a conservation officer. So, which, is kind of like in the enforcement side of wildlife and wildlife acts and legislation, stuff like that. So I did 2 years there in a renewable resources management program, a diploma program. And I was planning on going into the conservation enforcement degree, but I found that I really liked kind of the science and research side of things. And so what I did is I got my diploma there in environmental science, and then I went to school at Thompson Rivers University to finish my degree. So I got my undergraduate degree in natural resource sciences from Thompson Rivers University. Then I kind of went to work for a decade, maybe a decade and a half. And then I went back to school to take my master's in science at Thompson Rivers University. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I transferred into the PhD program at University of Northern BC. And so I'm still working on that. I'm in my 3rd year, so I hope to complete it within the next kind of year and a half or so. But I'm still a student. I'm a real glutton for punishment, so I don't know.
Must like it a lot.
No, I don't. I never did. I didn't like school. I never liked school. But I do like the things that I'm studying. So I don't know. This is just, it's just kind of life, right? It's hard to predict what you're going to do in life. And I didn't think I would be a career student, but here I am getting close to the age of 40 and still in school. So no problem.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
Just because you don't like school a lot right now doesn't mean that there's not a future in post-secondary for you.
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about your current position, what you do in your current job, and then maybe tie that into sort of what your research is?
Sure. Actually, I'll take you just back in time a little bit. So after I graduated with my undergraduate degree, so that's kind of like a bachelor's degree. It's a 4-year degree. I went to work for a consulting firm that is what they do is they work for clients. So they get hired to do various types of things. The company that I worked for had archaeologists, and they had engineers, and they had biologists. And so we would get hired by companies like BC Hydro to do environmental assessments, where we would go out and look at, like populations of fish downstream of dams, so that BC Hydro could, make sure that the ways that they were manipulating the environment were kind of reducing the impacts to fish and to, the natural world. And so we did a bunch of research and did sort of, and advise them on ways that they could, do things better. So there's all sorts of companies that would hire us to do things like that, environmental assessments. We would get hired by companies like Trans Mountain to, look at the impacts of pipelines if they're proposing a new pipeline, or, various other kinds of projects like, road upgrades or new roads, anytime you're kind of having some kind of impact on the environment. And so we would go out and do that kind of work. So I did that for about a decade. And I was doing a lot of work out of town, which was really great because I got to see some really cool places. I worked in Northwest BC and kind of in the Terrace area, and up in Northeastern BC and Fort St. John, and even out in Central Canada doing some bird work out there. So it's kind of all over the place. But I was working out of town, and I think I was out of town for about a couple of weeks at that point. And my wife sent me this posting that came up at MVIT, and she said, "Hey, I know you've talked about, being a college instructor and how much you'd like to do that." And so anyway, I applied for the job and I got it. And so in 2015, I started teaching at MVIT in the natural resources program, in environmental resources technology is what we call our program. And so, so it's been great. And so I got to come home to where I grew up and teach in subjects that I was working in and that I really enjoy learning about. And so it's been fantastic.
Great.
And so I've been kind of working away at my graduate work too. Specifically with my research, I'm looking at the way that salmon in the Nicola River, because Merritt is this really unique part of the province where it's a very hot environment with not a lot of rainfall. Like most of BC has quite a bit of water, but then there's some small parts of BC that don't get a lot of water, and Merritt's one of those. But we have really important populations of Chinook salmon and coho salmon and steelhead, some of which are at pretty serious risk of not being around in the future. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at the way that young fish that are living in the river, these are like juvenile salmon that are going to go to the ocean, but they kind of hang out in fresh water for a year to 2 years sometimes, just getting bigger before they go to sea. But there's the issue with the river, the Nicola River, and some of the tributaries, the streams that flow into it, are that they get too hot for salmon, like beyond the sort of temperature that would normally kill them. And so, I'm kind of asking this question, like, where do fish go, like when it gets really hot? And so I've been looking at kind of mapping and identifying cool spots of the river where, groundwater is upwelling or things like that. And then I've been tagging and tracking fish and looking at the way that they move into these habitats, when it gets really warm, and then sometimes they'll move out at night to go and feed. So that's kind of what my research is about.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So just to tie into that one more, so what are some of the duties like you would find in a day-to-day like job for you? Like during your work. So I guess
Yeah.
it's twofold. If you're doing the researchy field work, it's a little bit different than when you're actually at NVIT. So maybe you can speak to both.
Sure. Yeah, and I kind of talked about these. I mentioned kind of my professions that I belong to, and so I'll talk about the difference between those two things too. So I'm a registered professional biologist, which is my profession, is applied biology. So that's like where my expertise is in, and I belong to this membership of other biologists. Okay, and so we all kind of like belong to this group where we all agree that we're going to practice, sort of sound biology that's based on science. And if any of us start doing wacky science and doing things that aren't supported by science, we can keep each other accountable. Okay, it's kind of the same. These organizations are kind of the same reason why, if you've got a classic example is kind of like, doctors, right? You want to go to a doctor that belongs to like a profession of doctors where, if they're practicing mad doctory, they can kind of like, lose their job or something, right? And so it's in a similar kind of way. It's the same thing with these other professions, professional engineers, professional biologists, professional agrologists. They all belong to a membership where their accountability is to their profession, not to their employer. And that's a really important thing, so that we all uphold good ethics, proper ethics as biologists. But anyway, so I'm a professional biologist, but I've got my job now is kind of teaching biology. And so it's a little bit, different than my profession. Sorry, Jen, I totally forgot what your question was.
It was just about like what kind of duties would you
okay.
do in a regular day?
Yeah, so like as far as my professional duties, things that I would do as an applied biologist, I would do things like fish surveys, okay, where I would go out and I might sample streams in order to determine the types of fish that are there, which ages of fish species, etc. Or I might go out and do, bird surveys where I look at, the types of birds that might be using a particular environment or might be migrating at certain periods of time. So those are kinds of things that you can do in the profession of biology. There's, vegetation specialists like botanists. There's people that do restoration work where they take ecosystems that have been disturbed by, could be mining or oil and gas work, and they try and put those back to the way that they were. All sorts of different kind of fields included in biology, in the practice of biology.
Tom, I was hoping actually, you mentioned agrologist as well. Could you just tell us a little bit about what an agrologist is and what they do?
Sure. Yeah, and so this is another. I belong to kind of two memberships, which is why I've got this other designation as a professional agrologist. And so agrology is, in terms of the profession, is a fairly diverse field. It includes some of the more traditional types of disciplines, like jobs related to like agriculture in terms of like food crops and things like that you might think of. So you're kind of doing science in terms of agriculture. So you might look at productivity of soils in terms of nutrients, or look at the way that plants interact with each other, or research how different plants grow under different kinds of light, moisture conditions, whatever. But there's all sorts of other disciplines that are included in the profession of agrology, which is, there's a lot of water, sort of water experts, which is kind of the group that I fall under in terms of the agrologist, is people who work with water. And we know that water is very important in terms of managing our agricultural activities. There's some folks that do sort of contaminated sites type of work under the umbrella of professional agrology. And a few other kind of fields like that, but they're closely related. They're both natural resource based fields, but they're slightly different. So
awesome. And yeah, just to kind of continue on that same vein, it sounds like you're outside a lot, but can you just give us some examples of the types of workplaces that you might find yourself in and be working in?
Yeah, I would say, if you don't like being outside, I would just log off right now and wait for the next presentation. No, it's kind of a prerequisite to this kind of work. You know, most people that get into applied biology, applied sciences, agrology, you know, are often outdoorsy type of people. You know, like being outside. And the nice thing about making this your profession, and you know, particularly, you know, getting a professional designation, like becoming a professional biologist or professional agrologist, is it allows you to have a little bit of balance between you know, working out in the field and then sort of doing some of the more intellectual work of report writing and analysis and stuff like that. So, but yeah, a lot of time spent outside, you know, with your kind of knee deep in water and up to your elbows in fish and whatnot.
Awesome. And then just I guess in the same vein as that, what would either as an agrologist or you know, professional biologist, or maybe even in your work now, what do you see as, you know, like a typical day or week? What would that look like for you?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what my week looks like. So with my job at teaching at NVIT, you know, I'll typically spend a couple of days a week actually in the classroom with students, which is really fun. I love instructing at NVIT. It's been such a great change from you know, working out in the bush by myself so much to have this really nice relational job where I get to like meet with students and get to know people and you know, teach. So it's been really, really fun. So I spend a couple of days a week teaching. And right now I'm doing, I'm kind of working on my research too, whenever I get a few spare moments. But in the summertime, I usually transition to working outside. So I'll spend a lot of time out in the field collecting data, and you know, yeah, being for me specifically, you know, I spend a lot of time in my chest waders out in the stream, you know, measuring water temperatures and catching fish with electricity, which is kind of a weird thing. We actually take these they're called backpack electrofishers, and what they do is you put a positive and a negative electrode into the water, and you use the water to connect the current to complete the circuit. And what happens is when fish get into that electrical field, if you kind of do it right, because a fish has the fish will actually swim towards you. Fish have a muscle and kind of skeletal structure that's very linear. And so what happens is if you give a fish pulses of electricity on one side of its body as it's sort of swimming away from you, it'll cause that, because the side of the fish that's facing the electrical field gets energized, it'll essentially shock that side and the fish will start to swim towards you. It's this really bizarre thing. It's like a Star Trek tractor beam kind of thing, and you just scoop them up and they're just fine. So yeah.
And I guess you get to play with drones as well, right, Tom?
Yeah, so that's been kind of like, this is the cool part about, well, technology always, it's always going to be progressing. But, you know, these drones that were once kind of like, you know, were sort of reserved for military applications and then kind of became toys to the general public, have now become these really important research tools. And I know that people are doing a lot of cool things with drones in terms of like filming things and making videos and stuff like that. And what I've done with my research is I've actually put thermal infrared cameras on drones. And so then I fly them over the river and I capture both video and still images in the thermal infrared portion of the spectrum. So in the same way, like, I'm going to be dating myself here. I don't know if they don't have the show anymore. I know they don't, but you know, the old show Cops, right? Where they had like the thermal camera and they're chasing the bad guy. It's like that kind of view, except I'm looking at rivers and where groundwater upwells and stuff like that. That's what I get excited about. So, but yeah, technology has been huge and is a really important part of my research, and being able to do rapid reconnaissance of rivers and looking for cool water habitats. You know, before this technology, you would have had to, you know, sort of move around in the river with you know, a thermometer and find these sites. But now we can just, you know, collect this really cool imagery showing these features. So I could show you guys some images too. I could share my screen here later if you want me to.
Okay. Just along those lines of what we were just talking about, I'm just going to ask you, what do you like the most and what do you like the least about your current occupation?
I want to say the thing I like the most is working outside, and the thing I like the least is working outside. Because in Merritt, you're generally okay, right? Nice sunny days. But I've worked in some terribly wet places, not terrible places, but terribly wet places, where it's just, you're just soaked to the bone and miserable, but that's okay. Yeah, so I mean, the best part about the job is doing what I've always loved, which is kind of, is being outside, and looking at cool things in nature, fish and birds and mammals and whatnot. I guess yeah, I mean, it certainly comes with its challenges. I would say some of the biggest challenges are, and I'm gonna say, I'll tell you one maybe that's related more to my teaching job than than the applied biology side of things. But we've had occasionally, and I guess I want to motivate students to just keep at it. The thing that breaks my heart the most is when a student enters the program and chooses not to finish for some reason. That just really gets to me. And so those are some of the hardest things, is when you kind of working with somebody, and you've got you meet all these students that have such great potential, and then sometimes just life happens and you're not able to finish. But those are the really tough ones. Those are the ones you kind of think about. So anyway, so keep at her, I guess, is all I'm saying.
I get maybe a good time too to tell us a story here, if you don't mind. What is maybe like the one or two most memorable experiences you've had along the way?
Yeah, there's been a few. I would say some of the most memorable experiences are, when you have the days where, and this is for me because I like this kind of stuff, but I've had days where I've been dropped off by helicopter to do surveys, fish surveys and things like that. And I'll be, even including angling, which I'm like a really avid fly fisherman. And I've actually been able to do some of the stuff, in a scientific sense for work, where we're looking at sort of the amount of fish you catch per unit effort. And so I've been, on a stream fly fishing, just having gotten dropped off by a helicopter. And, you're just like, am I really getting paid to do this kind of stuff? Or like, moose surveys or whatever. But I had a really interesting one a number of years ago where there was, so I do a lot of work in, I'm a pretty avid bird watcher, like birder, and I do some of that work as part of my profession as well. And so there was a number of years ago, there was a lot of wind power projects going on. And as part of wind power projects, like these big wind turbines that you see, they have to do assessments for bird life, because sometimes birds get hit by these things, or they get hit by the guy wires and things like that. So anyway, I had the opportunity to, we got a call from our office out east, and I had the opportunity to go to Ontario and actually do some bird work. And I'd never done bird work in Ontario. I'm not sure I had even been to Ontario at that point. And so it was great. I got this invite. I was like, yeah, I'll go for sure. And so I hopped on a plane and flew up to Toronto, and then I rented a car, and I had to go to Lake Ontario. And there was this small island off, it was somewhere near Kingston, I believe. But there's a small island called Main Duck Island, and it was not inhabited by anybody. It had been inhabited in the 1930s, and they used to use it to run rum into the United States during Prohibition. And so there was all these old derelict kind of structures and things like that. And so I took this boat out to this little island, and I was working with another biologist from Ontario, and we had the whole place to ourselves. And so our job was to walk around the island a couple times a day, just looking at the big rafts of birds that were off the shore, and doing our surveys and stuff like that. And it was really interesting, being from BC, where generally we've got these mountains and fairly clean water. First night I was there, I went and I had my little cook stove, my little camp stove, and I grabbed a pot, and I went down to the lake, and I scooped up a pot full water from the lake because I was going to make myself a cup of tea. And so I threw it on the stove, made myself a cup of tea, and I was just about to take my first sip. And the biologist I was working with just realized what I was doing, and he kind of almost like had to smack the tea out of my hand. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just having a cup of tea." He said, "Did you get that water from the lake?" I was like, "Yes, but I boil it." He said, "You have like no idea the level of contaminants that are in Lake Ontario." And so I thought, okay, well, if I boil it, I'll get rid of like, the giardia or stuff that we might have around here. But apparently you should not drink water from the Great Lakes, so anyway, it's kind of funny. But what it was, one memory I have from that trip was they have these, what species of snake was that? They had like a freshwater aquatic living kind of snake. And it was like reproduction time for these things. And so they would make these big, like aggregations, these big balls of snakes where they were, having snake sex. And I think I can say that. I'm a biology teacher. So anyway, and it was just frightening. And there were snakes everywhere. They were underneath my tent. And I like to believe that I'm like, I like all of the creatures on Earth. Snakes are still like, I got to work at it. I got to really work at liking snakes. So anyway.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I know we have a couple, future biologists, I think, with us tonight. I'm just wondering if you're able to speak to where you see, professional biology, agrology, your field headed kind of in the future.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's really not going anywhere. And there's an interesting thing that's happening, which is there's some new laws in the province around, it's called professional governance. And so what's happening now is, rather than having, I shouldn't say rather than, but maybe in addition to having government oversight over people doing work like I do, like professional biology work, they're putting a lot more responsibility on professional biologists, professional agrologists, engineers, in order to, or just to make sure that they practice their profession well. And so there's a lot more responsibility being placed on professionals, in terms of them working ethically and using up-to-date and good information. So that's a really interesting thing that's kind of going on right now. BC is natural resources are very, very important in BC in terms of our economy. So whether we're talking about forestry or mining or oil and gas, these are all really important parts of the economy. And in order to use these resources well, in terms of reducing our impact on the landscape, we need professionals that are going to do good work and keep the natural world intact, keep the integrity of the environment. So I don't know what the future is going to look like in terms of jobs. I think that's a big unknown. We have a lot of as technology changes, people's jobs change quite a bit. But the cool thing about the folks that are moving into these careers is they're just so tech savvy that it's going to be really cool to see the types of things that people do. For instance, I'll give you a for instance on this one. When I first started working in biology, I've got this vest, this kind of it's called a cruise vest for doing forestry work. I use it for all my surveys. I used to have that vest just loaded with field guides, like actual physical books. Where do I have one? I probably have some here. Anyway, physical books. Hey, here's one right here. This is a guide to how to identify different ecosystems. So like books like this, I'd have dozens of these things weighing me down. Now I've got all of these books on my iPad as iBooks or as PDFs, and so it's really cool because I've got all these resources at my fingertips. And I think that the future biologists, future agrologists are just going to be so much smarter than than the old ones, just because of information that's available to them, right? But there's a lot of things that you really used to have to commit to memory that now it's just so accessible and allows people to really do a good job. So.
Can you tell us about some of the other professionals that you work closely with? So some other related professions?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was consulting, I was working for a kind of a geo-environmental engineering firm. So they would do work like they would look at types of soil. So there's professional engineers that would look at soils to determine their stability, in terms of building structures or building roads, or looking at, when you have something like a landslide, like why did that landslide occur in terms of the soil conditions and rock conditions, things like that. So there's professional engineers, there's professional geologists that are, working very closely with, soils and minerals and things like that. There's professional archaeologists. I work with a lot of archaeologists, and it's surprising because you kind of have, archaeology tends to be more on, no, I was going to say it's more on the social sciences. Well, I guess it's a social science, but you wouldn't think that you would interact a lot with archaeologists, but you actually end up working on a lot of the same sites when you're doing environmental assessments, because a lot of the places that animals like to be in terms of their habitats are also places that people have liked to be, like to have been, historically, and looking for all the evidence of where people had been in the past, and all that really important work. So yeah, professional archaeologists, and agrologists. So yeah.
Professional foresters.
How did I miss that? I like to give the foresters a hard time, I guess.
Yeah.
Professional forestry, for sure. Surprisingly, though, in the environmental assessment field, I didn't work with a lot of professional foresters because I was working outside of the forest sector. And I haven't worked directly in the forest sector for a lot of years, but professional forestry is a huge, a huge part of BC. We've got some of the best forest sciences on the planet. We've got some of the most amazing forest ecosystems on the planet, and it's a really important part of our economy. I remember years ago, I listened to, there was a guest speaker. It was the chief forester at the time, he made there was one quote which I remember him giving that really stuck with me, and he said, he basically said that, we can't stop growing trees in BC, right? So like, as much as people get worried about, deforestation, which, we do need to be concerned about, is how many trees are we taking? Is it sustainable? But, the climatic conditions in this province, like how much rain we have, and et cetera, is really good for growing conifers, these evergreen trees, and we really can't stop them from growing on the landscape. So, forestry will always be a very important part of the BC economy. So it's going to change from time to time in terms of which trees we're going to be cutting versus, so we've cut a lot of pine with the mountain pine beetle, which you guys were all probably pretty young then, but and now we're kind of moving into cutting a lot of Douglas fir, which is another species of tree. So so forestry will always be a part of BC, and the profession of forestry is an older profession, and it's an awesome sector to work in. So yeah.
All right. So can you tell us what skills and interests would someone need to be successful in your occupation, and some of the other professions that you've mentioned so far?
So I think I mentioned the first prerequisite, which is liking being outside. That's the first one. If you don't like being outside, that's okay, but probably forestry or biology aren't the professions for you. You can work in a lab as a forester too, but anyway. So as far as like how, if you're keen to become a biologist or become a forester or an agrologist or something like that, some good advice based on kind of personal experience would be, making sure that as much as you can, trying to get the best level of math and biology and chemistry, those types of sciences. If you can get those squared away, especially if you can do it in high school. That'll really help you out. I remember, I think I have to look it up here, but I think when I went into to college, I had to do some upgrading. I think I had to take my math 12 and my chem 12 when I went into college. And so I put myself a little bit behind in terms of upgrading. And you know what? It wasn't a big deal. So don't get discouraged if you're really having a hard time in one of these subjects. I feel like I did poorly in math. I can't remember my grades, but I feel like I did poorly in math in high school. And then when I got to university, I don't know, something must have switched, because I actually did pretty okay in my math subjects. And so don't despair. I always hear our students say this all the time too, I suck at math or whatever, you just got to practice at it. And I don't know, just commit to practicing and learning it. And if you're not good at it now, maybe you'll be better at it in the future. I have no idea. So don't get too discouraged. I know some people will decide their careers based on the courses that they don't want to take. Don't do that. Play the long game, get those courses done. But also don't worry if you don't know exactly, what you want to do when you leave high school. You probably won't end up in the job that you think you will anyway, but best laid plan sort of thing. So take your sciences, take your math, and that'll set you up real nice for a career in biology or forestry.
Kind of along those same lines, students at our school right now, they have to do 30 hours of career exploration when they're in grade 12. It's really open for what they're allowed to do and take on. Do you have any suggestions for ways that somebody now that's in grade 12 could kind of explore your profession, so just some of the professions you've mentioned, if they're keen and interested?
Yeah, for sure. So we're really fortunate. We've got a number of organizations, including we've got the college, we've got some people working in kind of the private sector in biology. We've got our government offices here in town. We have a tribal council, the Shwaukum Tribal Council, that does a lot of really cool work around archaeology and wildlife biology and fisheries biology. So I know that there's really good, not only volunteer opportunities, but work opportunities with these organizations. They're often looking for folks that are, wanting to walk streams, counting salmon, things like that, as well as with a lot of the bands actually in the Nicola Valley as well. I know that there's a lot of the bands have their own sort of natural resource managers, and they do all sorts of things in natural resources. And so there's really cool opportunities that are out there. And if anybody is interested to know what some of those are, you can get a hold of me directly for sure, no problem at all. I could kind of put you in touch with a few people. So there's a lot of really great work going on by a bunch of different folks. So yeah, there's some good opportunities that way. The other thing that I would say is you may not get a job necessarily, like in your high school years. Not to say that you won't, but you may not get a job actually working in one of these fields, but there's always volunteer opportunities. I know that I do, like every year, me and a few folks will go out and do some planting of shrubs along stream banks where there's erosion problems and things like that. And we're always looking for people that want to come and lend a hand. It's kind of grunt work, but it's a lot of fun. We have some lunch and we plant some shrubs and things like that. And it's something that you could put on your resume too, which is really important. So yeah.
Yeah, those are really great suggestions. So I hope for sure Brody and Colton were paying extra attention there, because that it's a great way to spend some of their time. And like you said, I think it looks awesome on a resume too, and shows that interest in the field for sure.
Yeah.
Any other just last pieces of advice that you would have for our young people in the audience, just as they're starting to consider careers and looking to make the next step post-secondary?
Yeah, it's I understand that not everybody knows what they want to do as a career, and I think that's totally okay. that's something that you can figure out. There's all sorts of paths that people will take. But I would definitely encourage you to, and I don't want to sound a little cliched or whatever, but you know, I would encourage you to go after your dream job, right? If there's something that you really want to do, then do that job. You know, I've heard a lot of folks, like, you know, and our students will say this too sometimes, and I'll often try to correct them on it, but they'll say, oh, you know, I really love, you know, fish biology, and that would be just like, if I could do fisheries work, you know, that would be the best job. But I think I'm going to do I think I'm going to do the forestry route because, you know, there's more jobs in forestry, or, you know, or vice versa. You know, don't, I think if you're passionate about something, there'll be opportunities. So don't be discouraged. I think just, you know, dream a little and go after that job that you truly would love to do. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I think that's probably probably the best advice I could offer.
Excellent, excellent. Now,
and don't worry if you suck at math.
Right.
It'll all come together in university.
Just before I forget, Tom, you mentioned that you might have like a couple images you could share with us of the work you're doing.
Oh, sure.
Like, I don't know, are these like the thermal?
Yeah.
Things? I'd love to see that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I know how to do this. Where's the screen sharing here? Sorry, I'm usually on a different program here.
I think if you hover your mouse at the bottom there, Tom.
I got her.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, it says that the host has disabled the participant screen sharing.
Oh, so that's on me.
I don't blame you. You never know what I might do with.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Screen. Okay. All right, let me show you some. Did you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
Here's some images from, here we go. Here's some images from some of the initial thermal work that we did. And so here you can see, this is a fellow that I was working with. He's a postdoc at TRU. And if you don't know what a postdoc is, it's somebody who's got their PhD, but they love doing research so much that they take on more contracts at universities to keep doing research and stay in school. So this guy's name is Garrett Whitworth, and he's like a drone fly-in expert. And so this is my raft here that I used for fly fishing. And what we did is we rafted down the Nicola with our drone, which you can see here. This is a DJI Inspire 2, if you guys are like drone nerds. And we put a thermal camera on it, and we took a bunch of images. And so here you can see, this is an example. This is actually a bunch of images, a bunch of different thermal pictures, you might say. And I've actually stitched them together and used them in a mapping program. We call it a geographic information system. So it's a computer-based mapping program. And so we can actually create these like thermal map layers. So this is what the individual pictures look like. So this is FLIR. This is, so FLIR is a brand. It stands for forward-looking infrared. So here we've got like cool, that is a pun, neat looking cool features on the Nicola. So I've applied like what's called an Arctic color palette here. So the hot stuff is kind of red or orange in color, and the really cold stuff is blue. So here you can see, if you can see my cursor there, here's a bunch of cold water entering the warm Nicola River. And you can like see those plumes, right, as it's mixing. So that's like a site that we identified. And then you've got some really cold groundwater kind of seeping out along the bank here. Here's another groundwater upwelling where, you know, there might be like, you know, sort of in the ground, there might be, you know, sort of openings, pores of different sizes, and it might allow groundwater in at a certain location. and you'll get this very strong kind of like upwelling feature in one spot. So that's what that is, a little cold pocket. More groundwater here, so you can kind of get a picture there. So we can, like, you know, I can't see in thermal infrared, maybe some of the young folks here can, but I can't. So we use these cameras, and it's really neat because, you know, this information that would not be available to us without like waiting around the stream with the thermometer is kind of instantly visible to us. So it's really great. And so they've been doing thermal infrared work on streams for about, the first paper, like scientific paper, was published on it about 20 years ago. But to be able to, and it was from a helicopter with a huge thermal infrared camera, like very expensive equipment. And now we have these teeny tiny little cameras that we can put on drones, which is really cool. So here's an example of this imagery put together and then put into a GIS, computer mapping program. So you can get really neat like layers that you can add on to maps like this. And some of my work this semester has actually been to try and improve the way that, because thermal imagery is very low in resolution, and so it doesn't stitch together very well. Like, you can't make a big picture out of it from individual pictures, a big mosaic. So I've been trying to improve the methods that are used to actually make this stuff stick together better. So yeah, that's kind of an example there.
That's very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks. So anyway,
Awesome.
hope you enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really neat. I'm gonna open it up here if there's any questions from some of our attendees, if they get a chance to ask. Let's go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I'll have the question if you can hear me.
You bet. Go ahead, Brody.
So I'm applying to UNBC and VCO for universities for
Right on.
wildlife work.
Yep.
And what is your like the suggestion of which way to go, kind of something like that?
Well, I am a UNBC PhD student, so I'm going to put my vote in for UNBC.
Nice.
I think they're both great programs. I've known I've worked with some folks that have come out of UBCO. I can't remember. I think they were out of general biology programs. So they don't have a forestry program at UBCO, from what I understand. But I think they've got a pretty strong biology program. So yeah, it's a great university for sure. UNBC has a really fantastic, it's called a Wildlife and Fisheries, a Bachelor in Wildlife and Fisheries Science, I think. It used to be a major that you could take within their natural resources degree, but now it's its own degree. Interestingly enough, NVIT has a transfer agreement with UNBC, and so students can take our 2-year diploma and get 55 of 128 credits towards that degree. So almost half by taking the NVIT ENRT diploma and then transferring up to UNBC. So that's a really good option for students too. But if you don't want to do the full 4 years there as well, I wouldn't discourage you from that either. It's an awesome university, really cool campus. You know, it's kind of fairly new as far as the major research universities in the province. So really neat architecture, and I would say Prince George probably feels more like Merritt in terms of like small townish kind of feel, even though it's not a small town at all. But it's got that like northern, fairly blue collar sort of feel to it. So, which I think Merritt has a bit of that too, fairly blue collar. Yeah, but anyway, both great universities, but I'll put my vote in for UNBC and Prince George. Actually, I'd love to, because I think Brody and I have met before, and I think I was really trying to work on him as far as coming to NVIT. So I'm gonna keep that up. You'll be hearing from me. So yeah, my number one choice is come to NVIT and then transfer over to UNBC. That way you get two two pieces of paper on the wall. You get a diploma and a degree. So
Yeah, not to mention you would be eligible for the immediate entry bursary if you started next fall too, which would take the lion's share of your costs away, right? Because it covers most of your tuition. So something to think about.
pretty sweet
Totally,
deal.
yeah.
But I understand wanting to get out of town sometimes too. I had to go to Southern Alberta, so.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brody. Yeah, keep me in the loop as far as your plans.
Sure.
And I know that Brody was looking for sort of work opportunities too, and so yeah, if anybody else has questions as far as that kind of stuff, I probably have a few more leads I should send you, Brody. Have you had a bit of work in the field yet, or?
No, I haven't. I've been a little busy lately.
I would think so. Yeah, it's a tough time to be a student, I'll tell you, these days.
Tom, sorry, you're also going to be presenting later in February or early March, specifically on the ENRT program at NVIT. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. They've got each program is doing sort of short presentations or question and answer kind of period that the recruitment folks are putting on. So if you want to come and learn more specifically about our program, that's a good chance to do it. But if you ever want to, I was just going to invite everybody up to the campus. I guess I can't do that, can I, Jennifer? But
You could.
Come on up, bring the group, come on up, and I'll know. Maybe I'll give you a virtual tour of the campus. I think that there are ways to allow folks in. I think they shut it down to the general public today, but
yeah, they did.
There's probably ways
And so the event that Mr. Anderson referred to is known as Experience NVIT, and you can actually register for that event. Anyone in the public can register for that event via the NVIT website, and you just want to look for the ENRT or Environmental Resource Technology presentation that Tom will be doing. I was just looking for my schedule, but I haven't been able to track it down here. I can't remember quite which day it is, but I know Experience NVIT runs from the last week in February and to the second week in March. So it's Monday to Friday, and each seminar is like 1 hour during the lunch break. So something to look into a little bit further. And I believe Mr. Anderson also has the poster for that.
Yeah, I do. And they'll all be presented live in the Library Learning Commons at MSS as well. And so for students that are interested, can come down from 12 to 1 and check it out there too, or do it on their own by signing up on the NVIT site. So yeah, hopefully we'll get a few of you guys out there as well again.
Can I ask, I'm going to assume that those folks that are here kind of have some interest in biology. Can I ask the participants what their interest is? I know we don't have a lot of time left, but does anybody want to share kind of what the thing that they're really excited about?
I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, so for biology, it'd be cool to go into like something with like a predator kind of biology, something like that. I'd like to learn I don't know how to explain it, but something along those lines.
Yeah, we were talking about grizzly bears, weren't we?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So there's some really great bear biologists in the province, and our grizzly bear populations. There's some that are doing pretty well, and then there's other populations that aren't doing so well. So I think that's there could definitely be a career there. So that's really cool. They're a species that needs a lot of room. They've got really big home ranges, so they do a lot of wandering. So they need a lot of room. And often, if they don't have a lot of room on the landscape, if the landscape gets too cut up by highways and pipelines and railways and whatever, they tend to suffer a bit. So yeah, if you can manage for grizzly bears, you can manage for a lot of other things in the environment. So. Awesome. Good job, Brody. And you don't have to share. I just thought if anybody wants to share and ask some questions.
We were just here to check out your thermal imaging on the river so that we know where to fish.
Yeah.
This is Duncan and James. Was that thermal imaging? Did you say that was where the nickel is coming into the cold water?
I think that first image I showed was Gishon Creek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so down to Lower Nicola there. Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah.
The Coldwater River, so I do temperature monitoring all across the watershed, and the Coldwater and the Nicola River, they tend to get about as warm as each other in the daytime. So they get really hot, in an August or early August or late July day, they can get up to 25 or 26 degrees, which is like real bad news for salmon.
Wow. Yeah.
Salmon don't do well over about 20 degrees, but the Coldwater is interesting in that it'll cool down at night. And the Nicola River doesn't tend to cool down because it's got a big lake that has that just sort of, it's got a lot of thermal mass to it, so it just soaks up a lot of solar radiation, and then that water stays very consistent in temperature. So yeah.
Right. All at the same level too, I guess, the same elevation, more or less.
Yeah, exactly, more or less, for sure. So yeah, right on.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk fishing. We'll talk fishing spots offline. You can give me a call about that. I just catch baby salmon though. They're, So.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. We'd be interested in some of those volunteering things. We were doing we try to participate in the Christmas bird counts and things, and anyway, yeah, we'll keep in touch.
That's good. Yeah, I'll probably see you on a bird count.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, let's well, if anyone has any last minute questions, let's get them in. Otherwise, I think we can wrap up and let everyone get on their way.
Good. Well, I appreciate everybody sticking it out for the full hour. That was pretty good. So get me on a fish subject. And
yeah, well, definitely didn't feel like an hour, Tom. It was super interesting, and I know, speaking on behalf of myself and School District 58, very much appreciate you joining us and
no worries at all.
sharing the information you did tonight. Super interesting, and I know that those in attendance, I'm sure, got lots out of it as well.
Well, I'm local, so if anybody has questions that they don't want to ask online on Zoom, just give me a call. You can just Google my name at NVIT, and you should be able to find my phone number, email, etc. So don't hesitate. Yeah, I always like hearing from prospective students.
Or you can always reach out to me and say, hey, I can't remember that guy's name. Who was he? The professional biologist, the guy that works at NVIT. And I'll forward the information on too.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Jennifer, are we missing anything, or?
I don't think so. I think we covered it off, and yeah, thanks for a really interesting presentation, Tom.
No worries. No worries. Glad you enjoyed it, and really appreciate the invite. I'm going to try and take in some of the future speakers too. There's a really good lineup coming up, so take those in as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks again, Tom, and thanks once again to everyone in attendance tonight. We'll say good night, and until next time, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Night.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.